Jim Parsons became the highest paid actor in the world for Big Bang Theory, where he was paid $26 million a year, but he was actually the one who decided to end the show, and now going forward he said he's out of the role completely. Jim Parsons was initially rejected for Big Bang Theory, where the producers didn't want him to play Sheldon and instead wanted Johnny Galecki to get the part instead. And the reason for this is pre-Big Bang Theory, Jim Parsons was really nobody as an actor, where his only major experience was doing 7 episodes of the show Judging Amy, where he had a minor role. That wasn't even what most people knew him from, where he actually did an ad for Quiznos in 2003, which was syndicated for 3 years on all major networks, so some people knew him from that as well. Meanwhile, Johnny Galecki just had a lot more experience doing sitcoms, where in 1992, at the age of 17, he actually had 2 lead roles, one being on a show called Billy and the other being on the show Roseanne. Which amusing thing about that was when he was cast on the show Roseanne, his character's original name in the pilot was David, but was later changed to Kevin. That was because the other sitcom he was on the main cast for called Billy, his character was also named David, so because of that they didn't want to cause confusion and renamed him. While Billy was a failure for Johnny Galecki, only going for 13 episodes, Roseanne was a huge hit for him, going for 93 episodes, and it did build his name nationally. And after Roseanne, Johnny Galecki didn't get a lot of work in Hollywood, so he was actually in the process of becoming a plumber and also a bathroom designer before he was cast for Big Bang Theory. But then when Johnny Galecki was offered the chance to do Big Bang Theory, he said on one condition, that said he wouldn't be playing the character of Sheldon, saying he didn't like the idea of playing a know-it-all, instead wanted to be Leonard. But still, even after that, the producers were on the fence about hiring Jim Parsons to play Sheldon, where Chuck Lorre, who was one of the co-creators of Big Bang Theory, didn't want him, saying he didn't have the resume or face, but ultimately Bill Prady, who was another co-creator, made the decision and said Jim Parsons was perfect for the role. But then after Jim Parsons and Johnny Galecki were cast, there almost never was a Big Bang Theory because their original pilot for the show was cancelled in 2006. Because in the original pilot, the characters of Howard, Raj, and Penny weren't there, and instead there were 2 actresses in the main cast, one played by Amanda Walsh and the other played by Iris Barr. And the pilot for Big Bang Theory was a lot different than what the show ended up being, where one big example was Jim Parsons' character Sheldon was actually much more straight, where he had a relationship with Iris Barr's character in the show. The problem was ultimately Amanda Walsh, who played a character named Katie, which was very similar to what Kaylee Cuoco's character of Penny would be, but the problem was whenever she was acting, she seemed too mean and the people didn't like her character. Because of that rejection, the producers retooled Big Bang Theory, firing Amanda Walsh and Iris Barr, and instead hired Kaylee Cuoco, who they previously rejected a year earlier, saying she was too young to play the character of Katie on Big Bang Theory. So they agreed on making Jim Parsons, Johnny Galecki, and Kaylee Cuoco the main cast of Big Bang Theory, and agreed they'd all get the same salary for season 1 at $60,000 an episode. And because they wanted a bigger cast, they actually introduced characters for Simon Helberg and Kunal Nair playing the characters of Howard and Raj, but they weren't sure if they were going to be part of the main cast or supporting characters, so they were paid $45,000 an episode for the first season instead. Kunal Nair actually had a rough go with Big Bang Theory initially, where he was actually fired from the pilot because CBS didn't like the idea of a mute character, saying it was too big of a handicap and they wanted another character instead. The only reason Kunal Nair got saved was because of Chuck Lorre, who was the co-creator of Big Bang Theory, where he didn't like being bullied by CBS, and he said he'd cancel the show before having him fired. Making the first season of Big Bang Theory, there weren't actually very good reviews, where it only got a 59% on Rotten Tomatoes, and even the audience score wasn't that high with an 83%, which wasn't that good for sitcom standards. Despite that, viewership was pretty high in the first season, where a lot of people resonated with the show, and because of that, they were getting 8.3 million viewers per episode on average. But the third season, things really started to blow up, where the reviews were getting a lot better, and at the same time, ratings were getting better as well, where they were averaging 15 million viewers per episode. And because of that, the money got a lot better, where Johnny Galecki, Kaylee Cuoco, and Jim Parsons were all making $200,000 an episode in season 3. Salaries became one of the biggest downfalls of making the show, where Simon Helberg and Kunal Nair were both upset in season 3 because they were being paid $75,000 per episode, even though they thought their characters were just as popular as Jim Parsons, Johnny Galecki, and Kaylee Cuoco's were. Things got more complex in season 4 when Melissa Rauch and Mayim Bialik joined the main cast, and they wanted $45,000 an episode each as well. And there was actually a point in the later seasons where the original 5 main characters each took a $100,000 per episode pay cut, so Mayim and Melissa would actually make $250,000 per episode each. But it ended up not mattering because in the final 3 seasons they were just printing money, with Jim Parsons making $1.2 million per episode, Johnny and Kaylee making $1 million per episode, Simon and Kunal making $900,000 an episode, and Melissa and Mayim making $250,000 an episode each. The show was more popular than ever in the final 2 seasons, where it was getting 17.5 million viewers per episode and the reruns were doing well on streaming, but the issue was Jim Parsons wanted to end the show. That was because in 2017, Jim Parsons signed a deal to do the show Young Sheldon, being a producer and narrator, and even though he never had to physically appear, he was making $500,000 an episode. But because of that, in 2018, Jim Parsons said he planned on leaving Big Bang Theory in 2019, but the show can continue with or without him. And this idea actually angered Johnny Galecki, because Johnny Galecki wanted to keep the show going, so he pitched the idea of Big Bang Theory continuing without Jim Parsons, and then he also pitched the idea of doing a spin-off series with him and Kaylee Cuoco just having their own show together. CBS said without Jim Parsons, the show is over, and that's probably the reason Johnny Galecki and Jim Parsons haven't gotten along that well publicly since the show has ended, where Johnny Galecki was one of the only members of the Big Bang Theory cast not to appear in Young Sheldon for a voice cameo. Jim Parsons actually reveals he didn't want to come back to play Sheldon Cooper in the finale for Young Sheldon, but he said if he didn't come back, there was going to be an uprising from fans because they wanted it for years. Because Jim Parsons did return, a lot of people thought this would eventually mean there was going to be a reunion for Big Bang Theory, but Jim Parsons shut that idea down right after Young Sheldon ended, saying he'll never come back as Sheldon again. Saying the only way he'd ever be involved with Big Bang Theory again was if they did a sci-fi spin-off series set 30 years in the future with Michael Keaton playing Sheldon. That idea is probably never going to happen. I think Jim Parsons is out for good here, and with that, I'm Charles Perallo. Please subscribe to learn something.